Hey everyone! In this video, I'll take you through the process of renovating our bedroom step by step, including a timeline for each task. This is what the room looked like before. It's about 9 square meters. The first step was removing the laminate flooring and underlayment, which was fairly easy, and I managed to do it alone in about an hour or two. Next, we worked on the electrical setup. We wanted all the outlets to be lower and to have sockets on both sides of the bed. My boyfriend used a wall chaser to cut channels for the new wiring. I'll link the tool in the description. He installed the wiring in PVC conduit, covered the outlets with protective caps, and completed everything over a few evenings. Here I decided to remove the ceiling mouldings because I felt the gaps between them and the walls were too large. Looking back, I probably wouldn't do this again, considering how much I disliked installing the new ones. The removal itself was quick and easy enough to do alone. Since the walls had been painted before, I needed to sand them before applying a fresh coat of paint. I used 80 grit sandpaper with a sanding machine, which I've linked in the description. This step took a few hours. After sanding, I quickly wiped down the walls with a damp cloth to remove dust. Next, I filled in the chasers. First, I primed them with PVA water mixture in 1:3 ratio and waited 20-30 minutes. For the external walls, I used the sand cement mixture because it's better at resisting moisture. Compared to gypsum-based plaster, this mixture was definitely harder to work with, and it requires more effort to achieve a somewhat smooth finish. I first roughly filled in the chasing, pressing the mix firmly into the grooves. After waiting a few minutes, I went back to remove the excess material and smooth out the surface as much as possible. And finally, I wiped off any remaining excess with a damp sponge. And then I moved on to the internal wall. I primed the chasing the same way, with PVA diluted with water in 1:3 ratio. Next, I mixed the gypsum-based plaster and started filling in the chasers. Achieving a smooth finish was much quicker with this plaster compared to sand cement mixture. The whole process of filling in the chases on both walls took about 2 to 3 hours. The next day they were not completely dry, so I had to wait one more day to proceed. Once the chases were dry, I could apply a top layer of finishing plaster, and before doing so I taped the chases with mesh tape to prevent future cracking. Next, I mixed the finishing plaster and started applying it to the chases. I first applied quite a thick layer of plaster. Here I came back to remove the excess of plaster and smooth it out as much as possible. This was my first time filling in the chases, and I learned everything about the process and materials online, so I'm actually quite curious how it's gonna hold up. The next day, finishing plaster was completely dry, so I decided to proceed with sanding. Here I'm using 220 grit sanding sponge, but looking back I should have started with 80 grit sandpaper and then proceed with the sponge. The result would have been much smoother. Once sanding was done, I wiped down the ceiling and walls with damp cloths and moved on to the caulking. I caulked all gaps between door and window frames and also caulked ceiling panels. Then I taped off all the surrounding areas with masking tape, and all prep work on that day was done in about 4 to 5 hours. Next, I applied primer to the walls and ceiling, which took about 2 hours, and it needed 4 hours to dry, so I returned next day to continue with painting. Applying one coat of paint to the walls and ceiling also took about 2 hours. As you can see, at this point we hadn't installed moldings yet. I would recommend installing moldings first before painting, because you will need to paint moldings after installation anyways. They will have dirt and remains of glue on them, so it makes way more sense to first install moldings and then paint everything at once. So this is how a room looked right after painting, and we returned next day to install moldings. We pre-painted them first, but this step could have been skipped because they needed another coat after installation. So the process is to first measure the lengths you need, then you would need to cut the piece with a saw and apply a construction adhesive on the back side of the molding, and then you can just install it. To be honest, this was one of my least favorite tasks. My boyfriend was helping me, and it took two of us about 4 hours to complete the installation in a relatively small room. The next day, I quickly painted moldings with the same paint we used for walls and ceiling. This is the final result. And in the meantime, my boyfriend installed the light switch and the sockets. For the flooring, we first laid an underlayment suitable for click parquet, and then we installed parquet itself. Since we were laying floors in 3 rooms and a hallway at the same time, the whole process took longer, but for this bedroom alone, it took about 1 full day. And then we installed the baseboard in 1 evening. This is the final result. The bedroom is ready to move into. We, of course, still have a few finishing touches left, like filling screw holes in the baseboard, painting the windows, door, radiator, but those can be done while living here. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions and I'll be happy to answer them.